Hey, what is up guys, Omogonix here and welcome to part 7 of my tutorial series where I teach you guys how to make a horror game in Godot, or a basic horror game in Godot to be more precise. And anyways, before I do get started today, I just do want to say that recently I released a new game called Sunnytown Murders. It was made by myself and a friend of mine, Alex, or SB, as they also go by as their alias. So if you want to go check it out, be sure to. It is available on my itch.io page or even on GameJolt as well. I put it on GameJolt too. So yeah. So if you want to go check it out, be sure to. It is free and it is a decent length game. So I hope you guys do enjoy it. I hope you guys do like the story and the overall mystery in it. And yeah, so now without further ado, let's get right into this tutorial. So the first thing I'm going to be teaching today is how to do scare triggers, and if you're wondering what I mean by that, let's say for example your player is just walking through the hallway and then, oh look, a head pops up from behind the wall, you know, because the player walked through a trigger to cause that to happen. You know, so it's sort of like just a one-off scare, which, you know, if the player plays through your game again, they're most likely going to be able to suspect it again. You know, usually them sorts of scares are good in, like, you know, linear horror games and stuff like that, but yeah. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do that today, so let's get right to that. So in your main level scene, what we're going to do is we're just going to add a child node. And this will be called an area 3D. So just search up area 3D in the create new node window and then select the area 3D. So the area 3D is basically triggers essentially in Godot. So what we want to do with this is we need to add a collider to it, a collision shape, and the reason as to why is because if you hover over this little caution icon here, it says this node has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. Consider adding a collision shape 3D or collision polygon 3D as a child to define its shape. So we need a collision for the area 3D. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is I am just going to quickly change the name of this. Where is it? There it is, rename. I'm just going to change the name of this to scare trigger. There we go. And then add child node, and we're going to add a collision shape 3D. So this here is going to be a box collider. I mean a box shape 3D as it's called in Godot. And so for this trigger, where I'm going to have it is I'm going to have it over here. And remember that example I said with a head popping up behind the wall? Well, that's what I'm going to do for an example in this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale out my trigger, so then it's a good size and the player can't miss it. There we go, something like that. And boom, we now have our trigger set up. So now what we need to set up is we actually need to set up the little head that's going to pop up around the corner. And how I'm going to do that is just with like a quad mesh, and it's going to have a face on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a face into my project right now. So I'll be right back. Alright, so as I record this next part of the tutorial, it is actually the next morning now, because I was recording the first 4 minutes of the tutorial last night at about 1 or 2 AM, and I got too tired and decided to go to sleep. So yeah, now I'm recording this part of the tutorial in the morning. So what I did before I did go to sleep is I did import the face that I am going to use for this little peek behind the wall into this project. So here is the face right here. This same face I actually used in a game of mine called This Game Is For You 2024. If you want to go check that out, be sure to. It's on my itch.io page. But anyway, so here's what we're going to do. So we have our scare trigger in the scene now, but what we need to do now is we need to now have our face, which is going to peek behind the corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top of my level here. I mean to the top of my scene, go add child node. And then we're going to add a mesh instance 3D. Move this over here. Alright, so with this mesh instance 3D, we're going to set the mesh of it, and this will be a, oh, didn't mean to do that, this will be a quad mesh, and the reason as to why I'm going to be using a quad is just because it's going to be a flat plane. And if you guys want to use like a 3D model for this as well, that's totally fine. You know, you guys can do whatever you want for your little scare triggers. You don't have to do what I'm doing here with a face peeking behind the wall. You could do whatever you like for your game. It all depends on what you want to do. I'm just showing you guys how to do stuff, so then if you want to do something for your game, then you can do it. Alrighty, so here we have the quad mesh. Now what we're going to do is we need to create a new material. So I'm just going to go to my materials folder, right click, go create new resource, and then search up material. And then I'm going to select the standard material 3D. And then I'm going to just call this face. And in the albedo, we're going to change the material's texture. So I'm going to change it to the face. And there we go. Just going to save that, and then I'm going to drag over this material to my quad mesh, and there we go. So since my face texture is transparent, I want the material to be as well. So if you have a transparent image and you put that onto a quad mesh or something, and then you realize like, oh wait, it's got a black background or whatever, what you can do is you can go to the transparency tab here, select where it says disabled, and then go alpha. And then boom, now you have your transparent image. You can also change the shading type if you want to, like if you want to change it to unshaded, so then if your face, you know, it isn't affected by lighting, or if you want your face to be affected by lighting. So yeah. So anyways, I'm just gonna scale up my face a bit here, and then I'm gonna put it behind the wall. There we go, we'll just leave it like this for now. And I'm going to rename this to face. And then I'm actually going to create a parent object for this. We're going to create a new parent node, so right click, go reparent to new node. And then I'm just going to reparent it to a node 3D. And I'm just going to call this scare, basically. So now, in my new scare object with the face as the child object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, go add child node, and this time I'm going to add an animation player. So this animation player will be how our face here peeks behind the corner, because, you know, we'll be animating the face to peek behind the corner. So yeah. So with my animation player, I'm just going to leave the name of it as animation player. And then when you select your animation player, you should have your animation tab show up here. And I'm just going to click on the animation button and then new. And then I'm going to create a new animation, and I'm just going to call this peek, because our character here will be peeking behind the wall. Okay, so I've showed how to do animations before, so I'm guessing you guys would know how to do like keyframing and stuff like that by now. If you haven't already, then be sure to go watch earlier parts of this tutorial series. It is important that you do. So yeah. And anyways, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting the first keyframe for the face. Now with my face, I'm actually going to have it start behind the wall, more behind the wall, like here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the keyframe for its position. And then when you're first setting like a keyframe for an animation, right, you'll be asked to create a reset track. Usually you should do this, so yeah, I would recommend doing this. A reset track is basically what your animation resets to when it's no longer in an animation, so yeah. Or when before an animation starts, I should probably say too, so yeah. Go create. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with the rotation, just in case I want to rotate the face at all during the animation. So I'm going to create a new track for that. And alrighty, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the length of this animation to 2 seconds. And I'm going to make it that the player will take about maybe half a second or a second to peek from behind the wall. I mean, not the player, sorry, the character here. And then we'll just move it like that. It does look a little bit low, I might raise it up a bit like that, there we go. And then we'll save the keyframe there. and then we'll make him do like a peek behind again. Like that. Alrighty, so let's see how this little basic animation looks. It looks quite choppy right now. If we change the interpolation mode from linear to cubic, this will make the animation look smoother. So now let's see how it looks. Still looks good, but it's a bit quick. You know, I want the player to be able to notice that there's a face peeking behind the wall here. So I might make the animation a bit longer. So I'll make it take a second to peek out, and then a second to go back behind the wall. And there we go, I like that a bit more. So yeah, so that there is going to be our character peeking behind the wall for the little scare. And then at the end of the animation as well, I'm actually going to make sure that my face is no longer visible. I'm going to turn off the visibility of that, and then set that at the end frame. And I'm not going to create a reset track for that, mainly because at the start of the animation, I want to have it so then visible is on. That turns on, go, oh, keyframe that, and then boom. So yeah. So that there is how we do our peeking animation. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to be doing the trigger. We're going to be doing the code for the trigger, so then we can get it all working. So then when the player walks into the scare trigger, they see this face pop up behind the wall, and then it scares them a bit. Alright, so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be doing the scripting for our trigger, our scare trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my scare trigger, and then I'm going to go to the script section on the inspector and select where it says empty, and then new script, and then I'm just going to call this scare trigger. And then with the actual name of the folder I'm going to save it into, I'm going to save it into the scripts folder and create. And there we go. So now with all this starter stuff here, we don't really need this right now. So we'll just get rid of that. Alright, so the first thing we're going to be doing is a variable for our animation player. So we're just going to write var animation player. And then what we're going to do is we're then going to do func_ready. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make it so then our animation player at the very start of the scene, so our animation player variable equals to the animation player that's in our scene. So we're going to go get node, and then in quotes root, and then another slash there, and then plus get underscore tree current scene.name. So we're just going to be getting the name of our current scene, because the root, that's basically like the, you know, the like main tree, and then you have your normal scene, so your like actual scene itself. And then with my scene in particular, right, my animation player, it's underneath an object called scare, so I'm going to do scare for my next path, and then animation player. So basically, with this get node section here, you just want to make sure that you're getting the path to your animation player in your scene. So make sure that you're entering the parent objects that might be above it and stuff like that. So yeah, just gotta enter the path to your animation player that's used for your peeking around the corner or whatever scare you're doing. So now we're going to be creating a new function, and this is going to be called func. And then this will be called trigger underscore entered. And then in the parentheses here, we're actually going to be adding the words body, and you will see why soon. So what this is, body, is this will be our player's, you know, their character body. So when the player enters the trigger, this body will come into count. So yeah, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing to do dots now, indenting. And if body equals to get underscore node, and then we're going to be basically doing the same thing here again with root slash, and then I'll just like copy and paste this part here. There we go. And then plus again. And then what we're going to do here is, instead of getting the path to our scares animation player, we're going to be getting the path to our player. So the player in my scene is just called player. So once we get the scene's name, we go slash and then player, and then boom. So if the body that enters the trigger equals to the player, what will happen is the animation player will play. So we'll go animation player.play, and then we need to have our animation's name in here. So what we're going to do is up the top here, we're going to add a new variable, go at export var, and the reason as to why we're doing this is to make it public. And speaking of public too, I've just been thinking a bit, and maybe that might be the best way to do the assigning of the animation player variable as well. Because let's say, for example, right, you want to use, you know, multiple scare triggers in your scene. You know, if you do it this way, the way we're doing right now, then the animation player will just equal to the same animation player as every other scare trigger in the scene. So, yeah. So, what I think we might do with this as well is we might actually make it a public variable too. And the reason as to why I didn't beforehand is because I was just thinking about if people had their scene constructed a bit differently or whatever, right? But, yeah, do make sure that you do sort of do things the same way I'm doing here with how you have the scare trigger and the scare itself in the same scene, like they're made in the same scene, so make sure you do that. So then we can do this here. So we're going to go at export var, animation player, and then we're going to do 2 dots there, and then animation player to make sure that the game knows, or to make sure that Godot knows that this is an animation player variable here. And then we're going to have a name here. It'll be called anim name, so this will be the name of our animation, and this will just be a string. So yeah, so they're going to be our 2 variables. So when it comes to the actual assigning of the animation player in the ready variable, in the ready function, we can get rid of this. Sorry for wasting your time with that. If you guys want to still do that, you can, if you find that better for your situation and what you want to do for your game. But yeah, so with the animation player.play, what we're going to be doing is in these little parentheses here, we're going to be entering anim underscore name. So what will happen is when the player enters the trigger, what will happen is the animation player will play the animation. So it'll play your scare animation. And if you don't want the trigger to happen again, there are ways, of course, in which we can do that. So in particular, right, if we select our scare trigger, as you can see, there are 2 variables here called monitoring and monitorable. So if monitoring is on, if true, the area detects bodies or something, or areas entering and exiting it. So if we actually disable monitoring in our script after our player enters the trigger, then that means that they won't be able to trigger the scare anymore. So a line below animation player.play, what we can do is we can do monitoring equals false. And the reason as to why we can just simply enter monitoring instead of doing, like, say for example, this obj.monitoring or something like that, is because monitoring is, it's already like a variable part of this object we have this script attached to, so yeah. Alrighty, so that there is going to be our scare triggers script. That's it for now. If we need to make any changes later on, we will. But anyways, here's what we're going to do now. So with your scare trigger, make sure that you assign your animation player, your scares animation player, into the actual scare trigger. So just drag it over and boom. And then we want to do the animation name. So because my animation name is called peak, I'm going to write peak in here and boom. So now our scare trigger is all set up. And there is only one thing to do left now, of course, and that's to test it out. Alright, let's go play and let's test out our current game. Alrighty, let's go see that scare trigger. Yeah, no, that didn't work. Alright, so it turns out that I am dumb. There is something which I forgot to do with our trigger. So, select your scare trigger in the scene. And by the way, guys, this is very important. Make sure that you don't skip over this, otherwise you might stuff up like I did. So you want to go to your, you want to select your scare trigger, go to the node tab instead of the inspector, and then with your signals here, where it says body entered, you want to double click this. Right, and then make sure that you select your scare trigger node in your scene, make sure you select that. And then where it says receiver method, what you want to do is you want to enter in the name of the function in your scare trigger. So the name of the function myScareTrigger, I'm pretty sure, is called, here, wait a second, I actually forget, what is it called? Trigger entered, so that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to double click on this again, go ScareTrigger, and then I'm going to enter in trigger entered, connect, and then boom. So now when we enter our ScareTrigger, it is now actually connected up to our method, and so now when we actually do enter the trigger, this method will now happen. So yeah, so now if we save, and then we actually go play again, go play, now everything should work out as normal. So yeah, make sure that you don't stuff up like I did there. Make sure that you do fill in the node signals. Make sure you fill in the signals. So yeah, alrighty, now let's test this out, and boom, it worked. So as you can see, when I went through the trigger, it happened. Now, there is a little bit of something going on here where whenever I walk through the trigger, the jump scare plays again, the scare plays again, and I don't want that to happen. And I even input a line, so then that doesn't happen again. So I don't know what's going on there. I will fix that up in a bit, but yeah. Overall though, as you can clearly see, our scare trigger does work quite well. So whenever I walk through the trigger, the scare plays. And again, it's only meant to happen once, but you know, there's a little bit of a problem with the script, so we'll get that sorted out in a bit. But yeah. Alrighty, so I'm just a little confused, because in the script here, I have it that when the player enters the trigger, monitoring will then equal to false afterwards. And as you can see here with the monitoring variable, it says if true, the area detects bodies or areas entering and exiting it. So how come after monitoring turns off, the trigger can still pick up the player's movement? Well, what I'm going to do is, instead of doing monitoring equals false, since that doesn't seem to really do anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm actually going to add in a new variable of my own called token. So token is sort of a variable which I do sometimes if I only ever want something to happen once in a script and I don't want it to repeat over and over again, as if it's in like a process function, or if the player has got to walk past a certain area multiple times and they've got to walk through a trigger multiple times. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is with var token, I'm going to make sure it equals to 0, and then where it says if body equals to, then, you know, the player's body, what we're going to do is we're going to do end token equals to 0. So if the body that enters the trigger is the player, and if token equals to 0, what will happen is the animation player will play, and token will equal to 1. So now this script will only happen when token equals to 0, and when it equals to 1, that means it will no longer happen again. So now let's go test it out once more. And now when we go through the trigger, as you can see, the scare happens. But if I try going through it again, the scare doesn't happen again. So yeah, so now with our token in the script, what happens is when the player enters the trigger, token will equal to 1, so then no longer will it equal to 0, and no longer can the player trigger the animation to play. So yeah. If you do want your animation to be continuous, then of course all you need to do is just remove the token stuff from your script, and then you're all good to go. But yeah. This won't be the only scare trigger in my scene. I'm actually going to make another one as well to show you guys what it's like to have multiple of these in your scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this scare trigger, and I'm going to move it over here. I think. Where should I have this one? I think here would be an alright place. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to have it so then a character actually runs past. So let's say, for example, the player is walking down a hallway, and they see like a little girl run past or something like that, like giggling or laughing, you know, that kind of thing. So I might just put this here. There we go. Alrighty. So now I'm going to pretty much do the exact same thing again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get out like a... What I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a capsule for this example. And I'm going to make it so then the capsule just moves across this part of the level here. They just run across, so yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a mesh instance 3D. Oh, I accidentally just made that a child of my scare trigger too. We don't want that. There we go. Put that underneath here. Alrighty. So now with the mesh, we're going to be setting it to a capsule. Well, you can do what you want for your one, of course, but the transform's been a bit stuffed up here. But yeah, you can do whatever you want for your mesh. You don't have to do a capsule. You can just do a normal character model if you want to, of course, for your game. I'm just using a capsule as an example, so yeah. So I'm just gonna change the radial segments on it. There we go. So now with my capsule, I'm gonna position this over here. And I'm just gonna rename it to character or something like that. And then I'm gonna create a new parent for it. Node 3D. I'm gonna call this Scare 2, I guess. Call it Scare 2. And then I'm gonna add an animation player again. There we go. And so with this animation player, I'm gonna call this animation, we'll just call it Run, because the character is gonna be running past. And so with the first keyframe of the animation, it's going to be the character's position, which is going to be reset here. And then at the end of the animation, so at the 1 second mark, the player will have, the character will have run across this area like that. Save the position at the end of the animation, and then also what I want to do is I want to make it so then the character is no longer visible at the end of the animation. So that means at the start of the animation I'll have to make it visible, like that. There we go. So let's see how this looks. And there we go, just a pretty basic run across the screen. So yeah, might even change the interpolation mode on the positioning. And there we go, that looks alright. So now with our scare trigger, what we're going to do is we're going to select the scare trigger 2. And I'm going to now get rid of the current animation player, which is in this variable here of my second scare trigger, and I'm going to drag in the new animation player that I just made for that running animation. And then instead of peak as the animation name, I'm going to enter run, since run is the animation name of this second trigger. And yeah. So now what we're going to do is we're going to test out the second scare trigger now. And we're going to see how that looks. Right, so what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to enter this trigger. So as you can see, the the character peeks their head behind the wall. And then if we go through this trigger, as you can see, we have a character run past. So yeah, hopefully you guys did learn something from all that. Hopefully you all do like the idea of the scare triggers for some simple scares in a game. Okay, so something which I just remembered was doing a sound which happens whenever you enter a scare trigger. So let's say, for example, you enter a scare trigger and then you have your character peek behind a corner, and then you might want a scary sound to play to let the player know, like, oh look, something scary's happening, you know? So yeah, if you want to do that, I'll show you guys how to do that right now. So in your main scene, oh, by the way, speaking of main scene, one thing we need to do here soon is we need to sort out our hierarchy. It's getting kind of messy, but yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to add in a new audio stream player, and this will just be called scare sound. And then we're gonna set the stream of it to a new sound that I just added into the project before called jump.ogg. If you're curious as to what this sounds like, I'll show you guys right now how it sounds. So that there is the sound, just, you know, a very simple thing, so yeah. And so what we'll do is with our scare triggers, we'll have it so then we'll go scare trigger. And if you want like a different scary sound to happen on each trigger, you can do that, because what we'll be doing is we'll be doing @export var, because we'll be getting the sound publicly. and we're going to go scare sound, ... and then audio stream player. There we go. So now, what we can do here is we can do if scare sound not equal to null. So what this means is if our scare sound equals to something, so it's not empty, what will happen is our scare sound will play. So if the scare sound isn't empty and it's all filled in the variable of our script, then it will play. So if you don't want to have a scare sound for your jump scares or whatever, that's totally fine. You know, that's why I have it so then if the scare sound isn't empty, then the sound will only play. It won't try play it if it isn't filled in, so yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to now go to both of my scare triggers here and I'm going to fill it in with this scare sound that I just added in. So we'll do that. And boom, there we go. Save that. So now there's only one thing left to do, of course, and that's to test it out. So let's go ahead and test it all out. In a future tutorial as well, guys, I will be teaching how to do like enemy AI and stuff like that, so don't worry if you are waiting for that. So as you can see, when I entered the scare trigger, the scary sound played, as well as the animation, of course. So again, if you don't want a scary sound to play when you enter the trigger, that's totally fine, you just don't have to fill in the variable. But yeah. So hopefully that helped you guys out quite a bit. And now let's move on to the next thing we're going to be doing for this tutorial, which is sorting out our hierarchy, because our hierarchy is absolutely messy right now. Alright, so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be tidying up our scene here. So our scene's hierarchy is kind of messy, and I want to make sure that I'm grouping things up so then our hierarchy isn't so, you know, just full with stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my 3 tables that I have in the scene, for example. I'm going to reparent them to a new node 3D, and I'm just going to call this tables. So now, this will just make our scene a bit neater, it will make it less chunky, because now we will only need to see these tables here if we actually want to see them, because we can just choose the drop down arrow on the table's parent object if we don't want to see them anymore. So yeah. And then we got our scare triggers, so we'll want to put these into a parent object too. I'm just going to right click, go reparent to new node 3D, and then I'm just going to call these scare triggers. There we go. And then I'm just going to boom, turn down, just press the drop down arrow on that, hide them. And then with the actual scares themselves that I have, I'm going to reparent them into their own little node. And I'm just going to call these scares. Also, if you don't mind having a messy hierarchy, that's totally fine. I'm just someone who tends to care about how my hierarchy looks, and yeah, I like to keep it as neat as possible, because as you develop a game, your hierarchy is just going to keep getting messier and messier and messier, so it is good to at least try keep it as clean as possible. And now with these audios here, I'm going to reparent them into a new node. I won't give them a node 3D, they don't really need a node 3D, but I'll give them just a regular node. And I'll just call these sounds. So yeah, I don't recommend giving your audio stream players node 3Ds if they're not 3D themselves, since that doesn't really make sense. So yeah, just give them a normal node as their parent object. And yeah, so I think that most of the things are in parent objects now, so we'll have our papers, of course, too, underneath parent objects. So we'll put the 2 bits of paper underneath a parent node called papers. And then last but not least, I think we'll do the doors. And we'll just reparent them underneath a new node as well. Now, when you do reparent things underneath new nodes, it is important to make sure that you check your scripts, because if you change anything to do with your nodes, right, in your scene, and it turns out that your script relies on the certain paths of nodes in order to get certain other nodes, right, certain other objects, then that could cause some issues with your scripts. So be sure to go through your scripts and make sure that, you know, you haven't messed around with anything too important. So let's say, for example, you might want to access your doors, right? And in your script, you might have it so then it goes, you know, root, then the current scene's name, and then just door. You know, if you reparent that underneath a new parent object, then that will stuff up your script. So then you got to go into your script and then, you know, fix up the path so then it now caters to what it currently equals to in the hierarchy. So one thing, for example, would be my pickup key script here. So with the actual keys pickup sound, since that is now underneath a parent object called sounds, I need to make a change to my script now so then it gets that path. So do be sure to do that. If you do make changes to your hierarchy, make sure that you're making the appropriate changes to your script if needed. And yeah, that is very important. So I'm just going to do that now with my scripts. Just going to continue to fix them up. Yeah, I think that all looks good right now. Yep. Alrighty, so I think all my scripts are all goods now. Okay, so the last thing which I'm actually going to be teaching in this tutorial today is how to do a basic pause menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new UI scene, and we're going to call this pause menu, and there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by adding a child node, a color rect. This will be our background for the pause menu. I'm going to make it black. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to turn down the opacity of it, just so then we can actually see behind the pause menu's background whenever we are pausing. Then I'm going to add a rich text label, some text, just telling us that the game is paused when we do pause. Paused, or yeah, paused we'll call that. And then we'll change the font size to something like maybe, oh no, 40 is way too small. 200 maybe? 200's a bit big. About 100. Yeah, 100's about an alright size. So what we'll do is we'll have 100 set for the font size of paused. I think that looks pretty alright. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in some buttons. And we will be adding interactivity to the buttons today. Not all of the buttons, but a few of them, which are easy to add interaction to. So we're going to add in a button. And this button here will be our resume button. Just going to drag this down here. I'm going to call this resume. So obviously when you press a resume button, it resumes your game. So that's what this button will be used for. Alrighty, I'm just trying to go for a particular sort of style here. Might even change the button color as well to something like green. There we go. I think green looks good. So I'm going to rename this to resume button. I'm going to rename this text to just paused text. And I'm going to rename this color rect to just background. Ooh. So now that we have our resume button, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to move it down. And I'm going to call this settings, so we can actually access our settings whilst we're paused. I'm going to call this settings button. Boom. Then we're also going to have a controls button as well, so we're going to duplicate again, and so then the player can check and remember the controls. We're going to have a controls window. Rename this again to controls button, and then duplicate that again, for this time a quit to menu button, so then the player can quit to the main menu. Quit to menu. And then, hey, why not even make another button as well for quitting straight out of the game? So not only can we just quit to the menu, but we can just quit straight to the desktop if we want to as well. Quit to desktop. There we go. Or we can just do quit game since I think that will look better. There we go. And boom. So these here are going to be our buttons for our pause menu. I'm just gonna save the scene now. Pause menu, save. So yeah, these are gonna be the buttons for our pause menu. We have resume, settings, controls, quit to menu, and quit game. So the buttons which we're gonna be adding interactivity to in this tutorial will be the resume, quit to menu, and quit game buttons. So yeah. But one important thing that we do need to do is to make sure that our pause menu works whilst the game is paused. We need to click our parent object of the pause menu here, go down to process, and then select always. What this will do is it will make sure that our pause menu is always processing, so even when the game is paused, our pause menu doesn't get paused as well, since otherwise then our pause menu wouldn't work. So we need to make sure that the process mode is always set to always, so then our pause menu can always work even when the game is paused. So yeah. Oh, just need to set that. There we go. Alrighty, so now that we've got our pause menu's look all set up, what we're going to do now is we're going to get to the scripting. So with your pause menu, select on its parent node, then you want to go to script, create new script, and I'm just going to call this pause menu, and then I'll save it in my scripts folder. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of the ready function there just for now, but we will have a we will get rid of the ready function there just for now, but what we will do is we'll go into the project settings, and then we'll go input map, and now what we need to do is we now need to add a new input. So we're going to go add new action, pause. So this action will be called pause, and then once you add your new action, click on the plus icon, and I'm going to make my pause button the escape key. So make your pause button whatever you want it to. Even if you're using a controller, you can do that as well. So yeah, because for those of you who didn't know, you can actually add controller inputs into your Godot input actions. So yeah. So now that I've got my pause key all set up, what we're going to do now is in the process function, we're going to make it so then if input dot is action just pressed, and then in quotes we're going to do pause. So if the player presses the pause button, what will happen is get underscore tree dot paused equals to the opposite of what paused currently equals to. So what get underscore tree dot paused is used for is this is used for pausing our game or unpausing our game. So if paused equals to true, then that means that, well, the game is paused, and if paused equals to false, then that means that the game is no longer paused. So yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to do get tree dot paused equals to the opposite of what it currently equals to. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to make it so then the visibility of our pause menu equals to whatever paused equals to. So let's say for example paused equals to true, and if paused equals to true, so will the pause menu, since we want the pause menu to turn on when the game is paused. So yeah, so paused, wait no, so the visibility of our pause menu will be controlled by the paused variable. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a few new functions. So we're going to add a resume function. We're going to go func, and then we're just going to call this resume. And so if the player presses the resume button, what will happen is the game will no longer be paused. So paused will equal to false, and so will visible as well, since the visibility of our pause menu will be false when our game gets unpaused. Another thing we'll need to do as well is, because we are doing, so then we can go back to our main menu if we want to, we'll do func back to menu. So if the player wants to quit to the main menu, what will happen is get underscore tree dot change scene to file, and then we want to get the the path to our main menu scene. So the path to my main menu scene would be you know, through the scenes folder and then main menu. So my scene is called main menu, and yeah, so that there is the path to my scenes my main menu my main menu scene. So whenever we press the quit to menu button, what will happen is the scene will change to the main menu. And then we're going to be doing the quit button, the quit function today. So func quit game. And if that button is pressed, then what will happen is get underscore tree dot quit, and then the game will quit. I would do functions for all the other buttons as well, but we're not going to be getting to them today. We'll do the settings and control buttons later on. We're just doing the resume, quit to menu, and quit game buttons today since they're easier. So what we want to do is, now that we have our methods in our script all sorted out, you want to go select your resume button, go to node, make sure you're on the signals tab, and then where it says pressed, you want to double click that. Make sure you have your pause menu selected, and you want to write resume as the receiver method. And then when you connect it, you'll know if you've done it right because there'll be like a green symbol here, and then boom, that's how you'll know your resume button's all connected. Now we'll go to our menu button. Also, I just realized that my quit button here, it needs to be changed to quit button. There we go. So if your menu button, do the same thing here, set the signal to this time back to menu or quit to menu, whatever your function's called. And boom, there we go. And then we have our quit button, so if we go pressed, change this to quit game, connect, and then boom, so now all our buttons are connected. Now, that isn't the only thing we need to do there, of course. Something else which we need to do is when the player pauses or unpauses, the mouse visibility, our player's mouse visibility actually changes based on that, so then we can move around our player's mouse and stuff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to my player script, since I've got a particular line of code here I would like to use. Actually, wait a second, is it in this code, or is it in my beginning cutscene code? Where is it? I swear I have a bit of code that does a particular thingy-majiggy. I'll show you guys what I mean soon. Alrighty, I found the line of code I was talking about. It's just this code here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting the mouse mode on our pause menu depending on what paused equals to when the player pauses and unpauses. So what we're going to do is when our player pauses, we're going to do if get underscore tree dot paused equals to true. What will happen is our mouse will be visible. So we'll go input dot set mouse mode and then input mouse mode, and then instead of captured, what we're going to do is we're going to do mouse mode visible. So then our mouse is actually visible. And then we're just going to copy this code here, go underneath, and then this time if paused equals to false, what will happen is our mouse will then be captured. So yeah, and what that means is that it'll stick to the middle of our screen and it'll be invisible. And then we'll basically do the same thing here. So then when the player resumes their game, the mouse mode will equal to captured, and boom, that should be pretty much it for our pause menu script. Now let's go to our main level. And we're just going to add this into our scene. So pause menu, there we go, add that into our scene. And now how about we actually go ahead and test this all out and see if it all works. I'm excited to see. Let's go play. Oh wait, but first before I do, let's actually turn off the pause menu so then it's not visible when we go in. Alright, let's go play. So now, as you can see, if I press escape, it pauses and unpauses my game. If I press resume, my game resumes, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's pretty easy to do pause menus in Godot, very easy in fact. So that's how you do a simple one there. We can quit to menu, and boom, quit game. Oh, for some reason the quit game function's not working there, that's weird. Hold on, let me just check that for a sec. I'm just going to check the quit game button here on the menu. That's weird that wasn't really working. Oh, I know why now. Hold on a second. Something which I forgot to do is with your pause menu script, whenever you go to a new scene, let's say for example you're going back to the main menu, right? something which you need to make sure of is you need to make sure that your game is no longer paused. You need to make sure that your game is no longer paused, because otherwise, if you go back to your main menu, right, and its process mode isn't set to always, then you won't be able to interact with it anymore because it will be paused. So you want to make sure that you unpause things once you do actually go ahead with it, so yeah. Alrighty, so that there, guys, is pretty much the end of this tutorial. There's nothing really much else to do today. I did have a few other things planned for today, but I don't really have much time now. So yeah, overall, hopefully you guys did enjoy this tutorial. Hopefully you all did learn something from it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and also be sure to check out my games on itch.io as well, and consider downloading them, supporting them, and yeah. Consider leaving a rating and a comment to let me know what you think of certain games of mine that you try. One game which I do recommend is Sunnytown Murders, which is my most recent game. Be sure to go check that out. It would definitely mean a lot. And anyways, without further ado, I'll see you all soon in my next tutorial or in my next video, depending on whatever next of me you check out. And I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.